So, the Sintashta Chariot. We will be discussing about the Sintashta Chariot today. For those who do not know what Sintashta is, well, Sintashta is a Bronze Age archaeological culture that was present in the Central Asian steppes. And Sintashta is considered an offshoot of Eastern corded ware cultures. So Sintashta is basically Eastern corded ware. And in this video, we'll be discussing about their chariots, because we know that chariots have been found in Sintashta, and people often credit the Sintashta culture to be the innovators of the earliest spoke-to-wheel chariots, and it's believed by them that all the other chariots are after the Sintashta chariot. So we'll be discussing more on this, and by the end of this video, you'll realize that the Sintashta chariots are not chariots at all. So let's start with a basic fact that most of you may not know about. We don't actually have a single complete Sintashta chariot. What we do have are graves with horse burials and imprints of spoked wheels. And yeah, that is it. We don't have the frame, we don't have the yoke, we don't have the axle, and no other part to say that, yes, this one is a war chariot. We have none of that. People saw spoked wheels and they just jumped to conclusions. I mean, yes, spoked wheels are lighter and used in fast vehicles, but spoked wheels alone do not make a chariot, because spoked wheels can also be used in carts, and carts are not winning any races, are they? A big part of the hype comes from the horse burials. Look, horses must be a chariot, right? But, it could have been a horse cart, because why not? Sintashta burials also had cheek pieces, which suggest that they did indeed domesticate or use horses for traveling. And here's a picture of a horse cart, and look, there's cheek pieces, spoked wheels. What else do you want for it to be labeled a chariot? Now let us discuss what the chariot experts have said about the Sintashta and Krivoy Ozero vehicles. In 1996, Joost Kowal and Mary Aiken Litauer, two chariot experts, wrote that at Sintashta, only the lower parts of the vehicles were preserved as imprints in the burial chamber floor. At Krivoy Ozero, there were also some imprints of the axle and naves, and that is it, and there were no full chariots. Now here's the key point. They said that the placement of these vehicle tracks, especially how close they were to the walls of the tomb chamber, limited how large the naves could be. In ancient chariots, the nave or the hub of the vehicle had to be symmetrical. The part outside the spokes had to match the part inside. But of course, that doesn't stop some from building their own chariot reconstructions anyway. They clearly said that the current reconstructions of these vehicles, especially the parts above the axle, are highly questionable. In fact, they said that there is no real evidence to support them. You just can't make solid claims about something when the physical remains just on there. So based on civil track measurements and their placement, the experts concluded that these vehicles lacked the basic maneuverability required for warfare or even for racing. In other words, the design was so limited that calling them chariots is more a matter of enthusiasm than evidence. Adding to this, Peter Raulving and Stefan Burmeister further clarify that the Sintashta and Krivoy Ozero finds should be classified as carts rather than true chariots, but they also said that the vehicles uncovered do not meet the technical definition of the ancient Near Eastern chariot. They also stressed the need for detailed studies of these spoke-to-wheeled vehicles, the horse gear, and the possible transfer of technology before reaching to conclusions about where the chariot first appeared. First of all, we don't actually know what the upper part of the vehicle looked like. The only physical evidence we have comes from the soil, impressions that were left behind by the vehicles. These impressions were found in special slots cut into the floor of the burial chambers. But even from this limited evidence, we can figure out two very important measurements. The first one is the wheel track, which is the distance between the two wheels, which is about 120 centimeters. The next measurement that we know is the nave length, which is the part of the wheel that connects to the axle. Now, here is why it matters. In real chariots, especially the ones from the Near East, the naves were much longer, usually between 40 and 45 centimeters. And even the shortest known ancient example for a chariot's nave is 34 centimeters. Why does the nave have to be so long? Well, that is because these parts were made of wood, and wooden naves on wooden axles don't fit tightly, like the modern metal parts do. If the nave is too short, the wheel will wobble as it spins, and that wobble puts stress on the entire wheel and the vehicle frame, eventually wearing it out or even breaking it. With a nave only 20 centimeters long, like the one at Sintashta, the vehicle would be extremely unstable. If the vehicle hit a rock or a bump, the wobbling wheel could tilt, damage itself, or even hit the side of the chariot. In simple words, the design was crappy. And remember, this is just from the known measurements. As for the rest of the structure, we have no direct evidence. So all those modern reconstructions of Sintashta chariots with elegant upper frames, they're mostly guesswork. The two chariot experts, Littauer and Crowell, made it very clear that we can only draw reliable conclusions from what we actually have. And even with that limited evidence, it is enough to show that these vehicles were not maneuverable. So when you look at these facts carefully, the idea that these were real war chariots falls apart. Calling them chariots may sound exciting, but based on the data, unstable two-wheeled carts would be a more honest description. Now let us step away from the step for a moment and look at what was happening in the Middle East, the place where actual chariots, real functional battlefield-ready vehicles, were being developed. The earliest evidence for these light horse-drawn spoked-wheel chariots comes from central Turkey, Syria, and Iraq. They appear in the texts from the Amorites, Hurrians, and the Hittites. Despite what many people keep repeating, there is no strong evidence that the steppe groups played a unique or special role in inventing the chariot in this region. Instead, what we see is a long development of this vehicle within the Near East itself. Now, of course, some have tried to revive the theory of a steppe origin, especially by pointing to calibrated radiocarbon dates from the burials at Sintashta and northern Kazakhstan around 2000 to 1800 BCE. These burials had soil impressions of wheels with 10 or 12 spokes. And like I said, they also had some horse bones and cheek pieces. So can we really call them chariots? Not quite. In fact, it is more likely that the highly developed Near Eastern chariot inspired imitation carts in the steppes, and not the other way around. The most detailed examples come from New Kingdom Egypt, where the chariots appear in tomb paintings, reliefs, and most importantly, as real surviving vehicles. They were built from heat-bent wood and rawhide. Their D-shaped floors, which were about 1 meter wide and half meter deep, were made of interlaced leather, which acted as a suspension to absorb shock and keep the wooden frame in tension. Overall, it was lightweight, and the sides were either solid or openwork. The approximately hip-high siding in profile, shown as rounded or rectangular, extends around the front and the sides, which leaves the rear open for rapid mounting or dismounting, so the rider could just jump out of his chariot if he wants to. The whole structure allowed for rapid movement, speed, and agility. 6 of these chariots have survived. There is one more point that further weakens the claim of a steppe origin of chariot technology, and that is the evolutionary sequence of wheel and chariot design, which can be seen clearly in the Near East and Eastern Iran, but it is absent in Sintashta. We find images of 4-spoked wheels in Kultepe, which are dated to 2000 to 1850 BCE, and we also find earlier depictions from Eastern Iran in the late 3rd millennium BCE, which is like 3000 BCE, 3000 BCE. And by 1750 to 1600 BCE, we find seals from Syria that already depict 8-spoked chariots. So we found 4-spoked wheels in Anatolia, and we find earlier depictions of such wheels from Eastern Iran. And by 1750 to 1600 BCE, we also find Syrian seals which depict 8-spoked chariots. But we also find that the 4-spoked variants also continued alongside the 8-spoked chariots. This progression from crossbar wheels to 4 spokes, and then from 4 to 6, and then 8 and even 9 spokes, this demonstrates local experimentation and gradual innovation. It also reflects advances in wood-bending techniques, which were already present in the Near East by around 2400 BCE. In contrast, Sintashta vehicles, they leap directly to 9 to 12 spokes without any earlier evolutionary phases, and there was no gradual improvement or no intermediate forms. There's an archaeologist who excavated Sintashta sites. His name is Stanislav Grigoriev. He argues that these carts were imports and not inventions. According to him, the Sintashta culture just borrowed the concept of chariots, and they lacked the technical tradition or innovation that is seen in the Iranian plateau or the Near East. This is reinforced by the archaeological pattern. Cultures that develop technology locally show diverse experiments. Those that import it show only the final form. So here Grigoriev is calling the Sintashta chariot an import, because we don't see any kind of experimentation, different kinds of wheels being experimented with, or chariots with different number of spokes. We don't find solid chariots or the more primitive kind of developments that we see in the Middle East. Of course, Grigoriev still calls them imported chariots, but we know that the Sintashta vehicle doesn't fit the description of a chariot as said by chariot experts themselves. So we will stick to the term carts. When we step back and look at the full picture, the claim that the Sintashta culture invented the chariot doesn't really make sense. The Sintashta vehicles, with their sudden appearance, technical limitations, and lack of developmental stages, appear to be imitations of the Near Eastern chariot, which are really true chariots. And we also know that the Near Eastern chariot was their own local innovation, and it had absolutely nothing to do with the steppes. Well, that's all for this video. Do not forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this. Also share your thoughts in the comments. And we'll meet in the next video. Goodbye.